that.
Thank you. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for the invitation to make me think about something that I'd sort of been doing but not thinking about. So it's always good to have to think about it. And reflecting on my experience of mentoring, it's something that I greatly enjoy. And I'm not sure whether it's quite as enjoyable for the people who I ment, my mentees, I suppose you'd call them. But it is quite, I think, an important process, as it can make a contribution to allow individual self-fulfillment within their research lives, within their research careers, within the environment. And I guess the way that often we think about mentoring is that you have, in my case, usually a glass of wine with you while you're doing it, and you bring to your mentoring a vast sort of backstory of experience in the world of research careers, of challenges and opportunities in research projects, and then somehow you listen to what the mentee, what the person you're mentoring is saying, what their challenges, what their concerns are, and then you dredge into the back of your hippocampus or wherever it is, and say, well, that's a bit like this thing that happened, or I've seen that happen with that, or someone tried that and this happened. And while that's the formal, I think, understanding of what the relationship's like, actually I think it's a bit more like this, in that the person who's supposed to be doing the mentoring often learns as much about what it's like to be someone else, about the experiences of others in the research environment, in the research community, often learns more about their own department or other departments from hearing secondhand what's been happening, what the challenges are faced by early to mid-career researchers, how they've been treated by others, what perceptions they have and where they've got those perceptions about what makes for a successful career. And that's then to see mentoring as as a relationship between two individuals, rather than something which is done for one person to another, or by one person on another. And I think the best mentoring relationships are like that. Of course, there's a range of different settings in which mentoring can occur, all the way through from formal mentoring relationships, and organizations like the Academy of Medical Sciences have formal programs of identifying mentors. Most institutions will have a mentoring program where mentors volunteer and mentees volunteer, and there's a kind of matching service, and then you get together and ment. But then there's all the informal mentoring that happens just along the sides and in the process of everything that we do every day. There are some particularly organized and insightful individuals who organize for themselves a string of mentors. So they'll have some internal mentors and some external mentors. They'll have some peer mentors who are at the same career stage. They'll have some senior mentors at different career stages in different institutions. And they'll just every so often touch base with them. I've got one senior colleague who needs no mentoring, I think, because he's brilliant. But every 4 or 5 years, he writes down a 5-year plan and shares it with 4 or 5 colleagues, and then takes them out to dinner to chat through what's in his plan and whether it makes sense and what they think about it. So they've organized their own mentoring relationship into the years leading up to the retirement. And in our own group in Camarades, we started a thing at Emily Senna's suggestion some years ago, where we used to call it a biannual retreat that happened every 2 years, but along came a pandemic and we've not had one forever, and I'm getting withdrawal symptoms. But as part of this, so we go away for essentially 2 full days worth, so a half day, a full day, a half day. And we have 2 or 3 academic sessions of 2 hours of chat where someone initiates a conversation, then we just shoot the breeze about the academic question. But then in between times, the early and mid-career researchers have mentoring meetings. So each individual ECR gets paired with, firstly, someone who's a PI but from another institution, so they're not in their line of management, and at the same time with someone who belongs to that extended research hinterland, might be a visitor from a funding agency or a journal or whatever, and they sit down for an hour and chat through their career and what's going on and what's happened. My wife comes along and she acts as a mentor as well, and I know for sure that the mentors really enjoy it, and the feedback that we've had is that those who have been mentored also get a lot out of it. Get a lot out of it. So I just wanted to try and think about what mentoring was and what it wasn't. And the trouble is that there are no clear guidelines or rules or definitions. So performanceconsultants.com, who you might imagine are a private sector organisation designed to take your money, they say that mentoring is advice and training and knowledge transfer. So they're describing a one-way process there. They're saying, come to me, I'll be your mentor, I'll tell you what to do. I'll give you advice, because I'm full of advice. I'll maybe train you how to do stuff, and I'll transfer knowledge to you. Consulting is presumably what performance consultants do. They come in, they take your money, they tell you what you told them, and then they leave with a set of recommendations. Coaching is the thing that's often used interchangeably with mentoring, and they say that that's about getting people to reflect on goals, their strengths, the potential they have for development, insights to what's happening, actions they might take. And actually, to me, that sounds a lot more like mentoring than coaching. So coaching, I think, is about suggesting to people particular things that they might do within an institution, within an organisation, within their career, training they might go on, and the like, which might advantage them. Whereas mentoring is I think, more about encouraging a degree of reflection and thoughtfulness and problem solving, which then leaves the person who's been mentored with skills and abilities and confidence to be able to address future problems in their own right, on their own, rather than always having to go back for more coaching about how I might deal with this particular question or that particular question. I think sometimes mentoring does stray into counselling, in that if you're in the middle of a mentoring meeting and something comes up which is obviously a cause of distress for the individual, then your options, while it might not have been on the agenda when you started, your options as a mentor or as a pair in that mentoring meeting are either to say, yeah, well, we can't talk about that because we're not going to be able to and set that to one side, in which case the rest of the mentoring meeting I think is pretty screwed, because there's an elephant which is sitting in the edge of the table, which you're not addressing. Or to say, well, let's talk about that and reflect on that and tell me about what the problem is and what might, and that then merges into counselling rather than mentoring. And Carol Kirkman has got this, I thought this quote was brilliant. In therapy, you follow the trail of tears with a goal of healing. In coaching, you follow the trail of dreams with the goal of igniting the person to be their best. But sometimes it's inevitable in a mentoring relationship that there's a trail of tears to be followed. And if you try and establish mentoring relationships where you don't allow there to be tears, I think you're not getting the most out of, the best out of, certainly that you could get out of some mentoring relationships. Because I think it is important that people are able to bring their fears, their anxieties, their concerns, their distress, and reflect with someone else on what the options, opportunities, strategies might be to deal with that. Now, the Academy of Medical Sciences has got a different set of definitions of mentoring, and they talk about developmental mentoring and structured mentoring. And so this is from their website, and they offer this developmental mentoring scheme where they match someone who seeks mentoring with a mentor in a different institution. Sometimes, often in the same field, but in a different institution. So in developmental mentoring, the mentor is more experienced in the relevant field, but independent of the mentee's direct professional life. And there's an important bit of mentoring where it bleeds into performance and development review, because in some institutions, what happens is that mentoring is part of the performance and development review process, so it's done by your boss. And that's fine, as long as A, your boss isn't the problem, and B, there are things that you feel comfortable discussing with your boss, and it's very good not to have your mentor, your boss as your mentor. The mentor helps the mentee to discover their own wisdom and to do things for themselves. So this is enabling mentoring. The mentor's experience and wisdom are not necessarily passed on, but can be accessed when needed. So this is sounding more like the coaching that was on my previous slide. There's a recognition of mutual growth and learning together despite the different levels of experience. And some people even advocate the idea that a mentoring meeting should be a bipolar meeting where there's introductions and catch up, and then there's half an hour one direction, half an hour the other direction, and then summary. So it's clearly a bi-directional process. Mutual growth and learning. The primary focus is on the development of the mentee and their personal journey. So this is about how the mentor can help enable the mentee to navigate their career, navigate their life. And great questions are central. So how about, I want to do this, how could I go about doing this? I've got this problem with X, how could I deal with this? There's someone at work that they don't mean me any harm, but they just really irritate the hell out of me. And I know they don't mean it, but how can I address this? How can I address this issue? What strategies could I use? Structured mentoring, which is the sort of thing that would happen within an institution potentially. There may be a hierarchical influence over their mentee and their career progression. I would argue that that's a bad thing because it gets in the way of true honesty in the mentoring process. The mentor is in a position to promote and escalate the career of the person being mentored. Now, people sometimes get confused by this. I think that role of promotion is very different from the role of mentoring. So the idea that you've got a mentor that then nominates you for promotion or nominates you for a prize or nominates you to sit on a committee because it's a good thing, for me that's not mentoring. A mentor might say, I see there's a vacancy on our local Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee or on our AWERB or for a student member of the university court or whatever. Had you thought about applying? That's mentoring. I think nominating them for such roles is not. Mentor gives advice and guidance, and the acquisition of skills or knowledge is paramount. The learning is always one way. The primary focus is on career development, and particularly career development where the primary benefactor is the organisation. So actually, the growth and maturation of the independent researcher is a kind of side effect, an added benefit. What's really important is the institution gets more bang for the buck out of this individual by making them function better in the workplace. And here it's advice that's the focus rather than the question, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about the other? And thinking about this, one of the things that makes for really effective mentoring relationships is the way that it engages reflection. So this is, we're having a 1911 theme here, as you'll see in a minute, but this is W.H. Davis from 1911. You'll know the poem, or at least the first stanza. What if this life is full of care, we have no time to stand and stare, no time to stand beneath the boughs and stare as long as sheep or cows, although sheep don't stare for very long, it's turned out, cows do, sheep don't. No time to see when woods we pass where squirrels hide their nuts in grass. No time to see in broad daylight streams full of stars like skies at night, and so on and so on. So this is an acknowledgement from kind of turn of last century that reflection is good for the soul. So reflection on the world around us is part of being human, that we don't just head down, get on with life, get to 67, then retire, and then get on with retirement. But there is a place in our humanity for reflecting on what's happening, and there's also a place in the work that we do on reflecting on our workplace. So this is from Lee McLean from another Australian company. This is the reflective wheel. This is reflective professional development wheel, where with either in writing or with another individual, you describe what happened, you articulate your feelings and your reactions to what happened, you evaluate what went well in this situation, this circumstances, what could be improved. This could be a review of your last year. You try and make sense of the situation, and you try and summarize what you've learned, and then analyze what you might do differently the next year. So think about cycles of professional improvement, which sure benefit the institution, but also help individuals to grow into their chosen roles. So this is reflection as a professional practice rather than as something we should all be doing anyway. And of course, reflection, and this is Francis Cadell, one of the Scottish watercolourists, painted in 1911 rather, woman in a mirror. You see she's slightly blurry in the mirror, either that or that's the real one, and she's blurry in real life. But reflection here is something that we think of as happening in a mirror, but also you can do the reflection in a mentoring relationship. You can reflect to someone else on what happened, what you think, and allow them to probe as to whether they think you're seeing the wood for the trees, or whether there might be something else going on here that, for reasons of self-preservation or blindsidedness or whatever, the other individual just simply cannot see. And the number of times I've been in conversations with people where I've reflected, and these aren't mentoring conversations, they're just conversations. I've had this is one of the things that life partners are excellent for, human or animal, being able to talk with them about what happened today at work, and they will say to you, have you thought that this might be what's happening? So that reflection is a good thing anyway, and I think it's kind of a bit like what mentoring is. And just in the last, I think I've got about 5 minutes left, just in the last 4 or 5 minutes, I wanted to touch on how this plays into where we are. So I personally, I have an unshakable belief that if you have a research team which is homogeneous, all white male, all white female, homogeneous in their makeup, it is much, much less productive, challenging, insightful, dynamic than one which is heterogeneous. But the issue with heterogeneity is that some people in society, people like me, have advantages, have the wind at our backs all our careers, and others don't. And the ones who don't bring a different background, bring a different story, bring a different set of experiences to the research that they do, but are disadvantaged in doing so because of their background. And here I think mentoring can have a really important role in identifying what the impact of that disadvantage has been, both externally, what opportunities are open or gifted to the individual, and internally how they think about their career, and addressing those to allow them to take their place at the table as a full member of research teams and to make their unique contribution in a way that oftentimes without that kind of support and mentoring, they don't feel able to do, or they're not able to do. Second issue that I think is relevant here is that the usual standard question I get asked after I give one of my talks about how research is shit, and we should all do better research, and you should publish your data and your code, and you should make it all available on bioRxiv, and even if you don't get positive results, you should publish your neutral or your negative results, and then people say, yeah, that's fine, but I'll never get a job. So if I do high quality research, I'll get a whole lot of neutral findings because most findings are neutral, and I'll never get promoted or whatever. And so this commitment that particularly early career researchers have to open science, to open research, is held sometimes by them, sometimes by others to be a risk for their career progression, for their career advancement. And I think that mentoring, formal or informal, can help them to see ways in which they can walk the walk of open research, of best research practice, while at the same time advantaging themselves in promotion and rewards and whatever by doing stuff that's neat and interesting. So, for instance, I'm just in Northumbria at the launch of their reproducibility network, and the talk just before our coffee break here was by someone who said, they'd done their open research and they found problems, and then they wrote a piece about their methodology and about how the outcome measures that were used in their research wasn't very good. So they moved into kind of quasi-meta research mode and did, you got lots and lots of citations for the work and got asked to give talks about it. So, trying to mentor people through to making a positive out of the open research potential disadvantage. And then finally, I wanted just very briefly to touch on this relationship between appraisal and personal development review and reflection and mentoring, because most of us will have some kind of formal assessment or evaluation of our progress. And that is supposed to, in most institutions, also to include things like personal development plans. We've decided the things that you're not very good at, how are you going to fix it? But that's done usually very much in the line of management, and so delivers things which are, well, usually they just deliver things that are on the list of things that might possibly be done. What courses does the university offer and which ones have you not done, so go and do them. But that personal development review is geared towards the institution's objectives and aims and whatever. And I think that we need to build into our structures some kind of outside the line of management opportunities for reflection on development needs, personal development needs, personal fulfillment needs, and mentoring, I think, can be one way in which that is done. And in those circumstances, mentoring is something which sure is critically important to early and mid-career researchers, but is equally important to people who are approaching, I was either going to say the zenith or the limelight of their career like me, the eventide of their career like me. So those are just some thoughts on mentoring, and I hope that was interesting and potentially useful.